Welcome everybody. My name is Mary Denyer from the Marshall Commission. I'm the head of scholarships there and head of policy. And I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar about Marshall. And we will be, as I said just now, just talking through the sort of generalities of Marshall and the 2021 competition, and also updating you on some of the changes and giving you some sort of updates on Marshall in general, what's going on with the current scholars, and etc., which I'll do towards the end of the session. And we will have a Q&A session using chat. We may not be able to get to all your questions, and if we don't, then obviously you'll be able to email either myself or Josh as well. So I'm going to hand over to Josh, who's going to share his screen with the PowerPoint, hopefully.
So hi everybody. As Mary mentioned, my name is Josh Stanton. I'm the Deputy Head of Public Diplomacy at the Embassy. So I essentially am at least on the embassy and consular side, sort of the lead and Mary's counterpart in making sure all of our consulates and the embassy are both promoting the scholarship, but also overseeing the administration of the selection process in the fall. So a lot of the folks that you guys dock in with on the consular side come September, October, are folks that I'm sort of overseeing directly. So really excited to be able to chat with you guys today. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen and get that up and running. Bear with me for just 1 second. Okay, Mary, can I just double check that the PowerPoint's visible? Okay, perfect. So as Mary mentioned, we're just gonna walk through the scholarship for a bit, a little bit about why British universities, talk about some of the eligibility and parts of the application benefits and some of the selection process. So I think the one thing that I think Mary and I always try to emphasize is obviously we would love to get some of your best and brightest students applying for the scholarship. But I think there are a lot of reasons that we always encourage students to think about British universities more generally when it comes to graduate degrees. You know, we have some of the top universities in the world. 4 of the top 10 universities in the world from the QS University rankings are located in Britain. Many of those schools, particularly those within the Russell Group and also across the country, are sort of doing really cross-cutting research and providing sort of a modern learning environment that is really tailored to their students. I think that one of the biggest benefits particularly is the flexibility that the schools offer. So there are opportunities for 1-year master's programs to do either a research or taught degree over the course of 12 months, something that I think is a little bit different than what we often kind of come across in the US. But also in terms of when we're thinking about affordability, you know, obviously student loans are always at the top of students' minds when it comes to education and how they plan to cover costs of tuition, books, etc. So having a more flexible program can also kind of help when it comes to affordability.
Josh, can you put it on slideshow? Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
We've not got it on slideshow.
Sure. There we go.
There we go.
So the other question that we get asked, I think by folks who are new to the scholarship is who are Marshall scholars and who exactly are we looking for when it comes to Marshalls? So I think there are often sometimes some misperceptions about what exactly we are looking for. And I think we sometimes can fall into the trap of this perception that we are looking for sort of the next Bill Clinton or the next sort of US president. It'd be great if we got an ex-president as a Marshall. It definitely would be a feather in our cap and we would love that. But I think having worked on the scholarship personally myself for almost 5 years now, I think one of the things that I love about the scholarship is the diversity of the students that we get. We have students from almost all academic backgrounds, geographic backgrounds, public schools, private schools, professional interests. So we've had students who have come, you know, have come from service academies and will do their time as marshals, go on to full-time service in the military. We have folks who are entrepreneurs who are interested in starting their own businesses. We have folks who are community leaders who have come to the UK to kind of learn how to kind of better engage their community. But also on the arts and humanities side, we have award-winning musicians, we have authors. The author on the right here is Rebecca Quang, who I think is a 2018 Marshall. Did I get that right, Mary? Yeah. And she has already written a trilogy of books that are very similar to sort of Lord of the Rings style, that have already received numerous awards and were on the Washington Post list of the top 5 new books for, I think, 2018. So really just to say, I think one of the things that really sort of encapsulates the Marshall community is its diversity, and the fact that we've got students from all sorts of backgrounds and interests, and we really try to emphasize and encourage that diversity in terms of what kind of students we're looking for, and in terms of how we promote this to our universities. So just a little bit of background of the history of the scholarship. It was established in 1953 by Parliament as a way of saying thanks to the United States for economic aid under the Marshall Plan. And the idea behind this was to basically enable intellectually distinguished Americans who would become future leaders to study in the UK and get a fully funded education. It started with a very small group of students in the first class. And then since then, I think we've had over 2,000 Marshalls since 1953. It's an incredibly diverse group, most of which are very active in kind of giving back to the Marshall community. And it's just a really, really exciting group to be a part of. I'm going to turn it over to Mary to kind of talk through the eligibility a little bit and some of the application.
Sure, thanks, Josh. Just to go back on the history thing, just to say that the first 12 scholars included women, which in 1954 was a very enlightened view from the British government, not one that they were always well known for. So eligibility. So our eligibility are fairly standard as usual, but there are a few minor changes this year, one of which is around the GPA. The Commission has thought long and hard about what to do about the fact that it seems that every US university is doing something slightly different during lockdown, and some of you have switched to pass-fail, and some of you are still grading, and some of you are giving students the option to do one or the other. And so in order to make sure that we have an equal and fair playing field, we have decided that we will be looking at the GPA at the end of the fall semester in 2019, which was the last time that everybody had grades in a uniform way. Now, obviously, there may be students where your universities have carried on giving grades who may have managed to get a GPA of 3.7 in the spring semester, and if that's the case, then they will still be eligible. But on the whole, we are basically going to be looking at fall semester 2019. If you have students who are just going to miss that grade, then unfortunately they probably won't be eligible, but we will be encouraging people to apply for the following year. I realize it's a kind of blunt instrument, but we thought of all kinds of different scenarios, and in the end we decided that this one was the fairest and the easiest to apply. And I'll take questions on that later if anybody has questions. Now, there is another slight change, and it isn't technically an eligibility criteria, but what we've noticed in recent years is that we've had a small but increasing number of students applying for a Marshall who are dual citizens, but basically grew up in another country and have spent 4 years in the US doing their undergraduate degree and have applied for Marshall. And under our regulations, that technically is eligible, but it isn't really within the spirit of what Marshall is looking for. So we're now saying that dual citizens can apply, and that includes British dual citizens, but they should normally reside in the US and have lived in the US before they started their undergraduate degree. We're not putting a time limit on that because obviously children of soldiers, children of people who diplomats obviously have smaller times of living in the US, but I think that it's an important element of making sure that we are getting the sorts of students that we're looking for. So I see that people are asking chat. I will answer the questions at the end, but I can't answer them as we go along. But yeah, so that's just sort of a clarification on what it means to be a US citizen. It shouldn't impact too many people, but we've had a couple of times where students who basically grew up in India but have US citizenship, but they're in all intents and purposes Indian, but happen to have a US passport, applying for Marshall. So we just want to try and remove that from the applicant pool. The rest of the stuff is fairly standard. If you are, if you are a dual citizen of Britain, you can't have studied for British qualifications, so that's GCSEs, A levels, and if you can't have studied for a degree of any nationality, can't have studied a degree in the UK, but you can have done study abroad. So providing your degree, the student's degree is from the US, but even if they spent a year in the UK on a study abroad program, that's fine. And then the standard stuff, you must have graduated from your undergraduate institution after April 2018. And yeah, and you must be graduating before September 2021. Okay, back to Josh. Right. Okay, so yeah, so you can apply in either region as usual. So the regions are based around the British Consular British Consular regions, and they can apply either where their permanent home address is or in the region of the undergraduate institution. Now, I will highlight here that obviously COVID and everything else may mean that we have to make a change on this slightly as if we get to September, October time and things become complicated around travel. But if we do that, please be assured that we will make sure that whatever happens will be the fairest that we can do. We may have to move to virtual interviews, but at the moment we're not planning to do so. That doesn't mean we haven't got all the plans behind it, but our hope is that we'll be able to still do non-virtual but in-person interviews, because we still believe that those are the best kind of interview for us to make our decisions around. But the only other thing I would say around where students are and who can endorse them, just to re-emphasize, because I think some people forget, we do expect all of our applicants to be endorsed by their undergraduate institutions. So if they've graduated and now at a graduate institution, we would still prefer for them to be endorsed by their undergraduate institution, because it just makes it, they will have been there for 4 years, and for some of their graduate institutions, they'll have only been there for a year or maybe 2, and we feel that the undergraduate institution knows them better. However, if they can make a good case and their undergraduate institution says that they won't endorse them, then we do occasionally allow graduate institutions to endorse. But I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. It is in our rules, but it's often one that's overlooked. Okay, Josh? You're going to take this one or me, Josh? You're muted.
Sorry, if you want to go for it, because I think this will
sure.
lead into the others.
Okay, so yeah, sorry, application components. Just to let you know that we are adding a couple of things into the application. We are asking a question, it will be short answer, 150 words, to the students around what's happened to them during COVID. Sorry, I jumped a slide, Josh. Around COVID, I'm not entirely sure what that question is going to look like, but what we're trying to avoid is all of the personal statements basically telling us what happened to them in lockdown. So we're hoping we're going to give them the opportunity to tell us in a short answer what's gone on, what the impact has been. And then we will also be adding a new question to the endorsement letter to allow you to tell us what the university's policies were during COVID-19. So that would be, you know, we switched to pass-fail, we gave students the option, whatever it might be. We taught all online, we didn't teach at all, whatever it might be. Hopefully it wasn't you didn't teach at all, but that will allow you to give us some information. We are also reducing the word count for the personal statement. It's going to be reduced from 1,000 words to 750 words. We hope this will help the students be more concise about what they're telling us about. It also might help you with the annual Marshall Rhodes dilemma, because they're not going to be the same length anymore, so they can't use the same essay, and therefore the whole question about who edited it and who looked at it, etc., is slightly different. We're also cutting the number of letters of recommendation from 4 to 3. And that means there'll still be a preferred recommender who should normally be an academic that has taught them and knows them the best. A general one, normally academic. Please remember that and remind the students that this is an academic scholarship, and therefore, you know, having lots of recommendations that don't come from people that can tell us about how they do academically is not helpful to us. and then the one on focused on leadership. So there will be only 3, not 4. And then finally, we're also going to be asking them just to list things in a more concise way. So we're going to be asking them to list their employment and their employment history, including dates, their personal history, interest in lists rather than in paragraph form, because our regional committees find it really difficult to sort of get at what they're looking at, quite often because it's just a big lump of paragraphs. So that's our plan on those changes. That there is a slight change to how the leadership question is worded, which I didn't tell Josh about, so he didn't add to the slide because I only remembered about it this morning when I was doing something. But it's not radically changed. We just got rid of some of the kind of describers that were in it because we found that even though we tested it, we thought we would test it, it didn't really work. So, but it's not radically changed. It's still asking more or less the same thing. Okay. Okay, so the academic, we're going to go through the selection criteria. So we have 3: academic merit, ambassadorial potential, leadership potential, and they all 3 are equally weighted. This is all on our website, I should add, but this is basically the things that our committees look at when they are considering each application. So it's not a hidden process. Our committees genuinely use this. Josh, you can probably talk more to how the committees use this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the committees particularly are very interested in, I think, first and foremost, making sure that the students have a very sort of structured plan in place for why they're looking to go to British University, what they plan to do there, and hope that what they hope to get out of it in terms of preparing them for their professional career. Particularly having worked with the DC committee for the past 5 years, this is something that they look very, very closely at. Because I think what we sometimes come across is students who may apply for a particular school. Sometimes it's a big name school like an Oxford or a Cambridge. But as you look through their application, it becomes less clear why they've chosen Oxford, and I think sometimes the selection or Cambridge in this case, in my example. And sometimes it might become apparent that they've chosen those schools because they are 2 very big branded schools, rather than have they chosen schools that are the biggest fit for them in terms of their specific interests. So I think in addition to evidence of sort of strong and relevant academic background that relates to what they're hoping to do, having that plan in place of knowledge of what proposed courses you hope to take, supervisors that you might want to work under. We highly encourage students to reach out to professors at British universities. They are, most of the universities in the UK and their professors are very well aware of the Marshall Program and the quality of students that come from it. So in many cases, they're happy to sit down, talk with the student through their interests, tell them a little bit of background about what their program or specific research is. And in some cases, we will have professors who offer to take on these students as advisors in the event that they win a scholarship or come to the school. So doing that sort of research, I think, helps. We'll have a little bit of information later on in the presentation about how students can go about finding that information. Obviously, as a US student who's new to the British system, it's I think a bit challenging trying to find info, so we'll have some information on that. Quality of programs and study, going back to sort of the quality of coursework that they've taken as an undergrad. Have they really tried to challenge themselves in their undergraduate career? And then the quality and breadth of recommendations. So Mary spoke a little bit about some of the recommendations we're looking for. We're really keen to make sure that the recommendations that the students get are from people who really, really know them well, who have had the chance to teach and work closely with them, have done research with them, but have otherwise can really speak to them and their traits and qualities and potential, because really what we want is make sure that they're giving the best possible sort of recommendation and best possible background to the selection committees. The second selection criteria, we look at leadership potential. So the selection committees look at, has the student demonstrated an ability to deliver results, both in terms of their schools, their research projects, extracurricular activities that have been involved in, really showing that when they come to the UK, they would really kind of take the opportunities by the horns and run with it. They demonstrated creativity and thinking outside the box about their particular interests. And then what we kind of describe as demonstrating courage self-awareness in basically being very confident, but open about sort of what they want to do, the challenges they think they face, and how they kind of want to get through it. This sometimes I think creates a little bit of confusion between this and I think our third selection criteria, which is, let me pull this here, ambassadorial potential. So what we mean by that, and I think working for the embassy, like the way we think about ambassadorial potential is, if you go back to the history of the scholarship, it was designed to kind of foster and create future leaders, but also to build strong and lasting US-UK ties. Essentially, we are looking for students who, when they go to the UK, they're going to be sort of serving as unofficial cultural ambassadors of the United States. They're going to come across students and British citizens who may very well have never met an American before. And so how they carry themselves, the things that they are able to share about American culture is going to be very impactful. And so we want to make sure that those types of ambassadors we have are really kind of representing the best and brightest and the best qualities of America. But by the same token, we are also looking for students that when they complete their studies are going to come back and sort of be ambassadors of the UK when they return to the US. And begin their graduate study. We hope that they have a good time in the UK, and this becomes sort of the start of a lifelong association with the UK. I mentioned earlier, we are very fortunate that we've got such a large alumni community that's very engaged, very active, very willing to give back. As one example, the Marshall Association of Marshall Scholars, which is the community of Marshalls, pulled together and created an endowment basically to fund a scholarship every other year in perpetuity. So it's the type of giving back that is really, really impactful, and something that I think is going to be, it's a community that they're going to be a part of for a lifetime. But we look at transferable extracurricular skills. Do they demonstrate an ability to engage others kind of in line with what we're looking for as an ambassador, and confidence in seizing opportunities when they present themselves? So in terms of scholarship benefits, there is fantastic opportunities, I think, with the scholarship. It covers a full payment of tuition, depending on which program that they've done will cover the tuition. The commission covers airfare to and from the United States. So when your student is selected, what we do is all of the consulates usually organize a tea, usually in the spring, to congratulate them and bring them to the consulate, invite their families. And then in September, we invite all of the students to Washington, and essentially we have a 2.5-day orientation where they will go around town and get the chance to meet with Marshall alumni who are working in different positions around Washington. So for example, last year, we took students to hear from Marshalls that we have working at NASA's Goddard Center on the Hubble telescope. We went to, they got a private tour from the Smithsonian African American History Museum from the curator of the museum, who's a Marshall. And they've been to the Capitol in the past, the White House, and that's usually topped off by a big event where the ambassador hosts them and the alumni community. And then we send them off to London, and they spend some time with Mary, likewise getting to kind of experience London, and then they're off. So we cover that airfare there, and then when they're ready to come back, it also covers a living allowance, provides sort of money for room and board and food to cover expenses. Obviously, London is a slightly more expensive city than a lot of places, so there's a higher stipend for London, but we also provide sufficient funds for the rest of the UK. And then a claimable allowance that covers books, approved travel sort of in connection with your research, commuter travel, whether if you're in London taking the tube or using another mode of transportation, thesis preparation, and then the cost of shipping your property to and from the United States as well. So there's a couple of different routes that scholars can take when it comes to a Marshall Scholarship. The first option is they can pursue a one-year scholarship. So this would be a 12-month master's program, research or taught. There would not be an extension on this. Typically where we see this a lot is students who are planning to attend, say, medical school, for example, and become a doctor, but they're looking to do a master's degree program beforehand, they will do the 1-year master's and then come back, start their medical degree. The important thing to flag here is we are looking, only 12-month master programs are eligible for the 1-year scholarship. So occasionally we will run into an application during the selection process where we may get an applicant who has applied for a 9-month program. And unfortunately, that would not be eligible under the 1-year scholarship for this. So we would hate to be at the point where we've received applications where we have to mark an ineligible scholarship because it's in a 9-month program. But just to be aware that to ask the students to double check that the program that they're looking at, if they're looking at the 1-year option, is indeed a 12-year scholarship. The majority of our students, I think, go for the 2-year scholarship option. So how that can look like is a number of different ways. That could be 2 1-year masters at either the same or a different university. That could be research or taught. So to use an example, if you've got a student who is very interested in working in, government under doing climate policy, but wants both sort of the policy side and a more harder science side, they could do a 1-year degree focusing on public policy, and they could do a 1-year degree focusing on sort of the harder science element of climate change. They can also have an option to do a 1-2-year master's, or they can cover at least 2 years of a PhD. And then there's also the 2-year scholarship option with a possible 3rd-year extension. So that would mean completing 1 year of a master's and starting the PhD in year 2. You could upgrade from a 2-year research master's, or you could continue 2 previous years of a PhD. With this option, 3rd-year funding is possible, but it's not guaranteed. And it would be something essentially that I think you would have to, the student have to apply to get that 3rd-year extension. Mary, I don't know if you want to add anything further to that particular bit.
No, I mean, you're correct. So for those doing PhDs, they can apply for 3rd-year funding at the beginning of their 2nd year. And they can also start a PhD in their 2nd year. But there's less funding available for that as well. So again, they would need to look for our funding elsewhere. And I would advise, especially if they're talking about that they include something in their academic proposal that just sort of implies how they might fund it if they weren't to receive 3rd-year funding. And I don't mean that we're going to hold them to that, but it just is helpful to see that somebody's thought it through about how they might get funding if they weren't to receive 3rd-year funding for a PhD.
So the tips that we often give students in terms of when they're thinking about universities, just sort of summarize. So the first one is really encouraging them to do the research. As I mentioned, I think why they chose a particular university matters a lot to the selection committees. So making sure that the students are really doing their research on programs in their field and really choosing a school that is the best fit for them. We're speaking from experience with our selection committees. One pitfall that we see oftentimes is students have really not always put as much thought into their second choice as they have into their first choice. And I would really encourage the students to make sure that they have a really solid idea of a second school. Your selection committees will ask a question about why they chose their second school. Our chair in DC, as one of the questions they always asks is, why have you chosen your second school? So making sure that they have a solid idea of, in the event that they are, for whatever reason, not able to get into their first school, why have they chosen their second choice? As I mentioned, talking to UK professors, we've got some of the leading researchers and professors in the world. Reaching out to them can be really helpful in terms of advice, getting assistance, or developing a research plan. Considering schools outside of London and Oxbridge, sometimes the best program for them is not always going to be in London or the Golden Triangle. Making sure that many other universities can provide a tailored experience and really can also get a different side of British culture. Developing an academic plan that demonstrates in the application how you plan to make the most of your time in the UK. And then just a reminder that students can apply anywhere in any university in the country. And I think that leads to sort of what we have with partnership agreements with schools, which I'll turn over to Mary to kind of describe.
Thanks, Josh. Just so you know, I am looking at questions. I'm writing them down as I go as well, so we will answer them towards the end. Partnership schools. So the Marshall had a series of partnership agreements with many of the top universities, in fact almost all the top universities in the UK. And this means that they actually waive tuition fees, which means that we're able to offer more scholarships, which is always a good news story. As to how that's going to carry on, we don't know, but we're hopeful that the universities will continue to support these partnerships. One exciting thing that which hasn't been announced through NAFA yet, but I'm going to announce it now because I can, is that we're going to, as of the 1st of June, we're going to do a virtual study tour called Marshall Mondays Brunch and Learn, and we've invited a series of British universities to do sessions on a Monday, which will be recorded, that you'll all be invited to join. And so that will be another way, and students will be able to join those sessions as well. So that's another way that students can learn about. It won't be all of the universities on this list, but it will be 13 different universities that we're doing. So we're looking forward to starting that, and NAFA will be sending out, Luann and Craig and everybody else will be sending out some more formal announcements, but because I'm here and because I'm letting people know about it. But yeah, so just to re-emphasize what Josh said, Marshall can be held at any university in the UK, so not just the partnership universities. And students should also, when they are applying, actually really intend to go to those institutions. So I know that some students feel that it's the best way to play the game is to say that they want to go to the University of Leeds and then magically come up with a different choice if they're offered the scholarship. And Marshall does not allow students to change institutions, in particular, especially not immediately after interview, because they will have just spent half an hour telling our committee why the university course that they just were talking about was the best one for them, and they didn't want to go anywhere else. So just please be aware that putting a partnership institution down isn't a magic pill to win a scholarship, nor will it help their case if they actually they've just put it down because they think it will be a good way of trying to win a scholarship. Yeah, so as you can see, it's a wide range. We will be adding, hopefully we'll add a few more. The Oxford and Cambridge colleges, your students don't need to list those. They're allocated by us when students are selected for Oxford or Cambridge. But all the other institutions are wonderful institutions, all of which I have visited and have great, they are all fantastic communities. Okay, so we've I just literally, for those of you who have looked at our website today, will have noticed that I have just updated the deadlines. The deadlines this year will be the 28th of September for the students and the 30th of September for you. I know we normally do the 1st or the 2nd of October, but our committees asked that we do it so that the deadline didn't fall at the end of a week, because they find it hard because obviously our committees want to start reading straight away. We'll be shortlisting, as we always do, towards the end of October. We'll be notifying people at that point. And then we'll be interviewing in the first 2 weeks of November, 2.5 weeks of November. And again, please be aware, not sure how those interviews are going to go ahead. At the moment, we are planning to do them in person as normal, but that may change. And if it does, we will let you know. Sorry, it's the 28th of September and the 30th of September. It is on our website. I updated the website today, so the dates are up there. In fact, the rules have been updated, apart from the most recent changes, which around the GPA have been updated on the website for a while, but we will be updating all of that. And then finally, the announcement will be made in the first week of December. And we ask for all those who have successful students to keep that under their hat until then. It's a bit like if you're watching the British Baking Show, you have to keep quiet and don't give it away. And that's the same for us. We like to make a big splash with our announcements, and we don't like clashing with anybody else. And seeing as lots of other scholarships have moved into our interview weeks and interview dates and all those, we keep it away from that. We also have an advisory council with the ambassador in December, which is when we make the final announcement, and that's why that's there. Josh, you do interviews. I'll let you talk a little bit about what the interview looks like.
Sure. So generally, when your student gets invited to an interview, what that's going to look like is it's going to be 30 minutes. It's going to be at the local consulate, or if they're applying in the DC region, it'll be at the embassy with me. It'll be so travel costs are completely covered by the commission. So whether they are flying in for their interview, or are driving, we would cover mileage in that case, costs for public transportation, but we will cover those costs. In the event that there is a need, there's an unavoidable need for hotel accommodations, we will cover that as well for one night, but we try to encourage our students to try to fly in and out on the same day, and we kind of work with them and we have with our travel agency to basically set up their flights. The only flights that we will not cover, unfortunately, is the commission cannot cover international flights. That's just because as international flights tend to be, increasingly expensive, there's just unfortunately not, we don't have the budget to cover a multitude of international flights. So all committee members are American. Most of them are Marshall Scholars. What you'll find is most of them have gone through the process before. They remember what it's like to be in that seat and probably a mixture of excited and nervous. So they take that understanding going through their interview. They want these students to succeed. However, there is not a requirement on our committee that you have to be a Marshall Scholar. So we do have folks from both the academic background, business backgrounds who have been really big supporters of the scholarship or heavily involved in education, who have been keen to be involved. And then typically every committee has at least one representative from British government on those committees. So at the embassy, it is our head of communications. But throughout the rest of the consular network, each of the consul generals themselves will sit on the committee and provide the interviews. And then all thematic areas of expertise are covered by the selection committee. So we purposely set up, recruit committee members to ensure that we have all different areas of that the student background's covered. So your student is guaranteed that whichever region they're applying for, whatever academic interest they have, they will at least have someone who has some either specific or broader experience in that field. And I think it really allows us to have a very robust and comprehensive discussion with the students. As Mary mentioned, we'll be looking at sort of the fall in terms of whether COVID may impact fall interviews, but this is generally how we operate our interviews. So just to look at the 2020 class at a glance. So this was the class that was chosen last September that will be going to the UK this fall. What I think you'll find is it's a pretty evenly split sort of cross-selection of students between where we are getting endorsed applications and where we are selecting students. So last year, roughly 41% of our students were from private non-Ivy schools. So this includes research institutions, liberal arts colleges. Almost 35% came from public institutions and universities. We had roughly 13% who came from Ivy League institutions. And then last year, we've always had I think through the history of the scholarship, had a very strong representation from the service academies. And I think this past year was definitely a banner year for service academies. We had, I think, almost 11% of our class was from one of the service academies. So it's I think the distribution is fairly consistent, I think, from the endorsed to the selected stage. And again, we encourage candidates to kind of apply from all types of universities and backgrounds. We're really looking for the qualities that makes the student more than any one particular school. In terms of where they're going, again, also I think last year, our class that'll be heading this fall is going to be pretty evenly split. So roughly 37% will be going to either Oxford or Cambridge and pursuing degrees there. Just a little over a quarter of our students will be going to London universities. And then about 37% of our students will actually be going to universities throughout the UK. We really, it's really remarkable to see where some of the students choose to go, and we have students who, you know, at other major cities in the UK or are in far-flung places, which I believe we have someone going to a school in the Hebrides, if I'm not mistaken, Mary.
Yeah, well, it's the University of the Highlands and the Islands, so she's going not quite as far as the Hebrides, but close.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I'm always mixing up my Scottish Islands. Sorry. But I think, again, it's just to emphasize the choice of the student's university should be based on sort of the type and strength of the degree program that they seek out.
Josh, actually, I'm just going to address quickly on that. I noticed there was a question that implied that said that our committees are raising that somebody might have chosen somewhere that isn't Oxford or Cambridge, and they're saying that Oxford or Cambridge is stronger. If any of our committee members are saying that in an interview, you need to notify us straight away, because that is not, we are very clearly instructing our committees not to do that. And in fact, we give them very clear course advice. They're more likely to be asking a question around the other way around, that somebody's chosen Oxford for a subject where the top ranked place in the UK is somewhere else, and they may ask that question, but even then they probably won't. So I would, if you are being asked questions, if your students are being asked questions where they're being told that they might have chosen Edinburgh but Oxford is stronger, they're being told that in an interview, then we need to know about that, because we don't let our committees do that. And there was another quick question around the difference between a selection committee and an interviewing committee. Our committees are the same. So we have, in some regions, when they get 200 applications, they have a reading committee that does the long list, but all of the shortlisting and the interviewing is done by the same committee. Okay, Josh, sorry.
No, no problem. Yeah, so just to wrap up, obviously, we would encourage everybody to visit the Marshall Scholarship website. Mary is regularly updating that with information about the scholarship and the requirements. There's also a lot of helpful things like videos from the Marshalls and other sort of resources, and bios from some of the students that we've selected over the years to give you a sense of the types of backgrounds of our students. One of the things that I think is one of the most useful tools for students is the online course finder tool. And it helps kind of students research UK universities and programs for their application. That's directly on the Marshall Scholarship website, but we've also included the course link here. I'll leave this up to give everybody, if you're keen to visit, just a chance to write that down. Obviously, we always encourage our students to go visit you, the fellowship advisor, to pop into the Merit Awards office and just kind of sit down and kind of lay out with you what they're hoping to do, their interest in the Marshall Scholarship. And then Mary works with the current Marshalls who are in the UK as well to kind of a really fun Instagram account that kind of profiles some of our students. Does a lot as well, both the Marshall Scholar Twitter account as well as the Embassy's Twitter account, which is UK and USA. We do a lot to kind of highlight both current and past Marshalls, promote the scholarship, highlight different aspects of it. The Embassy just last week started doing something called Meet the Marshall campaign, which is essentially every Friday we will promote 3 new scholars who were part of the 2020 class to kind of highlight that and share them with the rest of our community. So we try to tag the schools that those students came from when they do, so we always encourage you guys to celebrate those and amplify those. And we are continually looking at other ways to kind of highlight students in these opportunities. I'd say that's it from me. Mary, is there anything else that you would want to add before we?
Sure. And so just, I mean, I will address some of the issues that have been raised on chat shortly. Just wanted to give you a quick overview of what's going on now, which I think is important. Well, first of all, just also to say that, and I will share this when I send out the recording, that this is being recorded. We will share the slides as well. There is an outreach section on our website. It has our brand new brochures, which were shipped to the US, to the consulates and embassy, just as everything closed down. So Josh hasn't seen the lovely brochures yet, sadly.
They're probably gathering dust on my desk.
Yeah, somewhere, hopefully they're somewhere. And also, we also have, there's a recorded session with the chair of the New York region, which is a really helpful thing for students and advisors. And also there are films of our scholars. So there's all kinds of resources on our website, and I would encourage you to explore those. But just to give you a quick update on what's going on at the moment. Our current scholars, around 60% of them are still by choice in the UK, and the rest of them by choice returned to the US. We paid for those students who chose to go back to the US, and we will, for those who are first years coming back for their second year, we will pay for them to return to the UK. We are still paying them their stipend. We expect them to be studying for their degrees. I think there's only one who is unable to currently study for their degree, but we are still paying their maintenance costs until the end of their tenure. And we are talking to them all the time. We have these Marshall Hangouts, which hopefully some of you have watched, for some of the big ones, the dinosaurs and the poetry reading. We're having all kinds of sessions for them. I talk to them on a fairly regular basis. I send them pictures of #UnofficialMarshallCat. I'm currently sending them videos of different UK counties. So we're doing a lot of work with them. For the 2020 scholars, our intention is that they will still be coming in September. It is highly unlikely to, but I can never say impossible, that they will not be coming this year. We expect them to arrive in the UK. I can't tell you exactly when. It is possible, and this is not official yet, it's possible that it will be delayed, but that will be down to various issues around visas and whether our country's open, whether your country's open, whether they can get, whether it's safe to travel, etc., etc. But we are talking to our 2020 scholars. Some of them are receiving emails from universities that they're not offering the course that they applied for, and we're working with those as well to make sure that they get a good experience. Whatever happens, as of September, they will be Marshall Scholars. We'll be supporting them whether they're in the US or whether they're in, supporting them with being part of the program, whether they're in the US or the UK. That's about, I mean, that's speculation, and I've got it recorded, but I'm going to emphasize it's speculation because, as you all well know, tomorrow could be a whole different thing. So, but we are, please be aware that, please know that we are planning very carefully on scenario planning and everything else. So, we will do our best, and we are going to carry on supporting our scholars. They're very important to us, and we have no intention to leave them high and dry in any way. So I'm now going to attempt to answer some of these questions, and I'm going to, first of all, address the bombshell that I apparently dropped with the residency requirement. Just to re-emphasize, it is not a residency requirement. We have not put how long someone should have been in the US. However, I'm not talking about, and I already did say this earlier, I'm not talking about children of diplomats, children of soldiers, children of people, of US citizens who, for whatever reason, they spend more of their time outside of the US and the UK. But what I am talking about is students who are fundamentally another nationality and happen to have a US passport and go to a US school. We have problems with that. Those students can apply for Chevening. Those students can apply for Commonwealth scholarships. This scholarship is for American citizens who are normally resident in the US. So if you have a student who you feel actually does meet that, in whatever way, make sure they address it in their academic in their personal statement, why, that they spent most of their life overseas because. But what we're trying to eliminate is those students who are actually trying to double dip and could apply for a Chevening and often are. And so I think it's just an important thing to just re-emphasize that we have not put a residency requirement on there. There is no minimum number of years. There's no maximum number of years because we're conscious that people who move to the US and become US citizens may not have been in the US for huge amounts of time. So just to re-emphasize, it is not a residency requirement. We're just asking people to be normally resident if we can be. And if they're not, then you just ask them to explain why they haven't spent, explain their circumstances in the personal statement. Just addressing some of the other things. I realized that I didn't tell you where the changes of the application, which ones are permanent and which ones are not. the question about COVID-19 is not a permanent question. It is for 2021 only. All the other things were things we decided to do before that. So going forward, there will only be 3 recommendations unless our committees hate it so much that they decide they want to change it back. Going forwards, the personal statement will always be 750 words. So those changes will be permanent. It's only the COVID-19 questions. I noticed somebody was asking about the beloved ranking question. We do still expect you to do that. Answer it as honestly as you can. I know some of you hate it, some of you love it, but our committees want it, and therefore we discuss it every year and they want to keep it. So I'm afraid that is how it will be. Answer it as you will always have answered it, as honestly as you can. What other questions were there? 1 year and compelling reasons. I think in some ways there's some kind of misnomers around the 1 year. The 1 year isn't so what we don't want are people who are just basically doing a gap year, that basically want to come to the UK for a gap year. That is not what we feel the 1 year scholarship is for. However, if somebody has a good, strong reason why they could do a 1 year, they should do a 1 year over a 2 year, then they can apply for a 1 year. I would say, be aware that there are some issues, and this is not our issues, but issues for them around medical school and law school, in as much as that your school year starts significantly earlier than ours does. So if you're on a 1 year scholarship, you may not have finished your degree because you have to return to the US in July to start law or med school. And that is kind of a shame because they don't get to spend 12 months in the UK, but they also then are trying to finish a degree in the UK alongside medical and law school. So that's not to say they can't do it. It's just to say one of the things that when people are thinking about it and when students are thinking about it, they need to bear in mind is that that could be an issue. Funnily enough, with the second years, it doesn't seem to be as much of an issue, but with the first years, it does. Somebody also asked if you could do a 9-month degree in a 2-year scholarship, and the answer to that question is yes. Somebody else asked about whether professors will reply if students email them. On the whole, they do. At the moment, I think there's a strong possibility they'll answer quicker than they would normally because we're all in lockdown still at the entire UK. Well, actually, no, we're being alert at the moment. We're not staying at home, we're being alert. Not really sure what that means, but we are. Josh can't comment, he's British government, I can. So as far as, you know, people answering, they probably will. I mean, you all know how sometimes academics operate, and so they are as mercurial in the UK as they are in the US, but especially if they're listed as the contact for a course or a supervisor, then they do tend to answer, but, you know, again, they may or may not. Somebody asked about a sample application. We don't give out sample applications. This is because otherwise they get into circulation. However, I have no objection to you registering for the application so that you can get into it. Please don't use the same address as your contact address. So don't use your personal address, email address rather than your contact address, your university address, only because Embark uses those emails and gets very confused if it has the same email for 2 things, and you'll suddenly find that you can't log into your section, your official section, instead of sorry, lost my train of thought entirely. Sorry, it's Friday afternoon. It's actually Friday evening now, and I'm losing my train of thought. Yeah, so make sure you can do that and don't submit it. I mean, obviously don't submit it, and if you do submit it, don't endorse yourself. Most importantly, don't endorse yourself. You know, I know that you may all want to be Marshall Scholars, but don't endorse yourself. What other things we're asking? Right, okay, now I'm going to look at stuff that's actually asked on here. Overview of campus advisors' role in the process. So, actually, I mean, I can give you an overview what I think Marshall should be, but actually the people around you on Zoom are probably much better at kind of those sort of answers and questions around what campus advisors look like. They look different in every campus, and they do different things. For Marshall, we do expect you to work with the students to a degree, and that may be hugely and one-on-one, or it may be not quite so much, depends on your school and your policy. We do expect you to have got to know them so that you can help them with their application and with the endorsement process. we hope that you will help them, sort of give them guidance, point them to the right places. And we hope that you'll have some kind of selection process. Now, some of you will only have one person, and, you know, there's no point having a selection process for that person. But for others, you know, we are asking you to endorse these students. So we do really want people to endorse the best students and the students that they think should be endorsed. And, you know, I mean, there's no punishment if you don't do that, and the committees don't think any less of you, but, you know, it is an endorsement process. So it isn't just send us every application you've got. Do put some thought into it, because it's your university that's supporting those students. Let me just check what else is. On the GPA thing, just to say again that we are going to be looking at the GPA from fall 2019, which is the last time that for many of you, your schools actually gave out grades. However, I'll re-emphasize, if your university has continued as it did normally and is giving out grades as it would have normally done, and a student goes from a 3.69 to a 3.7 in the spring semester, and it shows that on their transcript, then they can apply. However, as I said, if a student, if you've switched to pass-fail, on the whole, we are going to be looking at that fall semester. You've switched to pass-fail and somebody's just under. I tried to work out a way where we could work it out, where you could tell us how they were going to get a 3.85 to get their GPA up. It became impossible for us to work that out. So what we are saying is, you know, you should encourage those students to apply the following year. You know, there is always that option and they would still be eligible. And I realize that it may not be a perfect solution, but I think in this time of COVID, there are no perfect solutions for everything. We're just trying to be as fair as we can. I'm just looking at other questions. I probably missed some. Let me look at what else I wrote down. So on ambassadorial potential, just to re-emphasize on the ambassadorial potential, you don't have to have experience of the UK, but so, you know, ambassadorial potential is all kinds of things. It's about being future ambassadors for the UK and current ambassadors for the US. So you do not need to know, you do not need to have experience of the UK. Having said that, if they're applying for a scholarship for the UK, they do need to know a little bit about the UK. And in this day and age, there is really no excuse not to know that. I always say that when I first started doing this job, I used to tell students to look at the BBC ticker. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It used to be this thing that you could turn on and it would run along the bottom of your internet. And if you're as old as I am, you'll remember it. And if you're younger than me, you probably don't. But I do advise that students should be reading the news in the UK, and they should be reading around their subject. They probably will get asked a question in their interview if they get to interview stage around, you know, what the policies are in the UK around their subject and their interests. So if they don't know that, you know, that's going to be difficult to sort of justify.
I always say as well, they could probably leave the Churchill quote at the top of their personal essay off as well. I think with our selection committees have seen that many times.
So I'm just reading down. So yes, I agree. The Dinosaur Marshall Hangout was excellent. I loved it. Are there any, so do I have any information about trends or preferences for research versus talk masters? No, I mean, it's pretty much what most scholars will opt for talk masters. There are no preferences from the commission either way. It's just the best course for the student and whether they're qualified for that. Students do not need to apply separately for the universities they hope to apply for, they plan to attend for winning the Marshall. We do that for them on behalf. If they need to do, if it does require a GRE, there's not many courses that do, actually it's mostly economics in the UK need to GRE, then I would recommend that they start working towards that and working on that. But other than that, we will deal with the other things that they may or may not need, and we deal with the application process. Having said that, there is one caveat to that. If students are applying for Gates, obviously, and Cambridge, and they're also applying for Marshall for Cambridge, then obviously they need to apply to Cambridge. You know, the deadline for Gates is the Cambridge 15th of October, usually around there. So obviously they shouldn't miss out on applying for Gates just because I've said you shouldn't apply. There's no harm, but they won't get punished if they've applied in advance, but they don't need to. Are there any restrictions on students planning to apply for medical school during a Marshall Scholarship? Could they leave the UK for their course study to return to US medical school interviews? So there's two answers to that question. The first one is if they're on a one-year scholarship, we actually require students to have already been accepted at either medical or whatever graduate school they're going to. For that exact reason, to prevent them from spending more time concentrating on applying and traveling to the US whilst they're in the UK. For the two-year scholars, they have a limited amount of time they can spend outside the UK, so that's 30 days personal time. So we don't stop them from going to medical school interviews and law school interviews, and many of them do during their second year. But obviously, because they've been in the UK for 2 years, we feel that they've actually spent more time in the UK, they've really absorbed it. Remember, this is a soft power scholarship paid for by the British government to allow the scholars to experience the UK in all its glory, or in all its lockdown at the moment. And, you know, so that is the main reason we want our scholars to spend the majority of their time in the UK. Yes, do I announce when the application is opening? Yes, it's still the end of May, hopefully. I'm working on it. Is the answer to the question is I'm currently working on it. I expect it to be opening at the end of May. It will maybe the first week of June. We have a bank holiday, another bank holiday coming up. So that may delay it slightly because I won't be working. But yeah, no, the plan is that it will be last week in May, first week of June. But don't quote me on that. This is why I hate recording things. This is a real problem. Will winter grades for students from trimester quarter schools be looked at GPA? Yeah, I mean, it will be whatever, I call full semester, but it'll be whatever the last set of full grades were before Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever other festival you may celebrate over that winter period. As far as doing tests for fake out, it doesn't make any difference to me. I don't care what you call your application if you do it, because I don't see it as long as you don't submit it. If you submit it, I'll see it. Sorry, I'm still scrolling through the questions. Yeah, so I mean, in some ways, the GPA thing is going to be a little bit of a suck it and see, and I understand that it's not perfect, and we're still trying to work that out ourselves. But we have gone through lots of iterations, and we're trying to be as fair as we can to all students. And you know, not much else we can do. We're all in the same boat to a degree, and all those other platitudes that I could come up with. But you know, we are trying to do what we can to make it fair for all the students. And because I hear from so many different students that they're doing different things, and there are all kinds of different solutions that every university is coming up with that makes it slightly hard for us to, and we aren't going to drop our GPA requirements. So that will be what it will be. Have I missed anything else? Oh no, I said that. I think, let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay, about academic rank of recommenders matter. I think, sorry, something. Does it matter if they don't have a full professor? Well, no, it doesn't, providing that the academic or the person who's writing for them as a preferred recommender is somebody who is a full-time member of faculty, who is teaching them, who has actually taught them, that isn't farming it out to their teaching assistant to write the letter. It's you know, an important aspect to have an important a recommender who can speak to their studying at the university. And the answer to the question, yes, the preferred recommender must come from the endorsing institution. It should be somebody who has taught them on a regular basis, who knows them well, and just make sure that they are able to write a letter in an intelligent way. We haven't got rid of the ability for you to be able to see those letters, so you'll be able to see the letters as they come in. But yeah, we do expect, it's an academic scholarship. I re-emphasize, we've, in recent years, because we added the leadership recommendation, I started to see a trend for students to have 1 academic recommendation and 3 kind of leadership-y type recommendations. I re-emphasize that this is an academic scholarship to come and study in the UK, and we have to apply to British universities, and we can't use leadership recommendations to apply. So we do need that information on their applications. Okay, I think hopefully I have answered. If I've missed questions, just email me directly. Oh, hang on one sec. So if a student is applying as a 3rd-year law student, is it preferable for the undergraduate institution to endorse them, not graduate? The answer to the question is normally, as I said, we require students to be endorsed by the undergraduate institution. However, if the law school does know them better, then they can put a case forward for that. But also, I would also say that there's no reason why they couldn't have one of their references. If the undergraduate did endorse them, there's no reason why one of their recommenders could not be from their graduate law school. Yeah, and Kurt makes a good point. They have to ensure they're still eligible based on the distance from their first undergraduate degree. So they will have had to have graduated after April 2018 this year. Okay. Are there any other questions? Yes, there is still a rule around, somebody's asked about the rule about choosing the big university. Well, it's not really big universities, the Golden Triangle. So the rule is still that if they have in their first choices, year 1 or 2, the University of Oxford, University of Cambridge, and a series of London universities that I'm not going to roll off because I can't remember exactly which ones they are, then they won't be able to use those for their second choices. We do this to make students look outside of the Golden Triangle. I'm sure you're all aware how difficult that can be sometimes, but actually some of the best courses are outside that Golden Triangle, and so that's part of the reason why we do it. Also, it isn't included in our rules, that particular part, but the rule about funded degrees. Please, please, please look at the degrees that we don't fund. Students who list any of those degrees that we don't fund will not even be considered. Re-emphasize, not considered. I go through all of the submitted applications, and if I see the MPP Oxford in their choices, the committee doesn't see the application anymore. It's automatically ineligible. The list is not that long. The list is repeated in the rules. It's on our website. It's everywhere. So please make sure that they look at that. And the other question I would say, the other thing that happens sometimes is the length of the courses for the 1 year. When you've got a 1 year application, can I recommend that I know you're all so busy, and I realize that scholarships have all moved into the same period and it's really hard, but get somebody that's not you, that may have a little bit more time, including the student, to just Google it and look at how long that course is. Because if it's 9 or 10 months, and all of the universities, it's usually Oxford and Cambridge that have those courses, they all say it on their websites, how long those courses are. So again, if we find somebody who has applied for a 9-month course during a 1 year, for a 1 year scholarship, they are automatically ineligible. They will not be considered by our committees. So just be aware, because these people are supposed to be the future leaders of the world. So they should be able to follow basic instructions. I know it's a big ask, but you know, this is where we are. Let me just check if there are any more questions. Okay, all right. Well, I think given that it is now an hour and a quarter, and I'm sure you will have better things to do with your day than listen to me and Josh, or just listen to me. I wanted to thank you all for coming. I hope it's been a useful session. I realize that I probably dropped a few things on you that you weren't expecting, and obviously I can answer questions. We're doing what we can to help support you and our students and our future students during this time. Please be aware that I am as in locked down. I am currently in my bedroom. It's not somewhere I ever expected to welcome NAPA members, but here I am. And we're not likely to get back into the office anytime soon, sadly. So we are doing what we can, and we are supporting our students. If any of your current scholars, if you have current scholars and they're worried, you know, point them towards me and we will help them with whatever they're worrying about. And please do look at our new Shiny website. I spent a lot of time in November creating our new Shiny website, and there's a whole load of information on there, which I think is really useful. We also hope, and Josh will chime in with this, but we also hoping to run some panels over the next month or so for students, perhaps one for first gen students using some of our current scholars who are first gen students, and some others with just regular students. So we are going to try and run some sessions for students as well. So hopefully that will be helpful for everybody too. And don't forget to come to Marshall Mondays Brunch and Learn, because the UK universities are really excited and there's going to be some really interesting things. My understanding is the University of East Anglia is going to run a creative writing workshop as part of their session, which, given that they are one of the world leaders for creative writing, that's quite exciting. I'm going to be excited about that. The Marshall Mondays will be the same time as this, so 5 p.m. UK time, hence the reason we have lunchtime for East Coast and breakfast time for West Coast, hence the reason why it's called Brunch and Learn, which I can't take the credit for. That's a whole Anne Wallen suggestion, so thank you, Anne, for that suggestion. But we will be sending way more information about that, but I'm allowed to, yeah. So there you go, Anne's putting it in the comments as well. I will also circulate the text of this. But hopefully you'll all come along and enjoy, and then the study tour, we hope, will take place again sometime when we can all travel and get on planes, and hopefully I will come to your country when I'm allowed. I'm not at the moment. I'm sadly a British citizen and therefore not allowed into the US at the moment, which makes me very sad. Or not, I can't get out of my house at the moment, so it really doesn't make that much difference, but hopefully all of these things will change. So keep safe, keep healthy, and keep doing the amazing job you do. And thank you so much for coming along today. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.